ChatGPT gets 4.1 finally. To be honest, I was not expecting it.
And OpenAI also launches something called Codex.
And that's surprising because we have been talking about the Windsurf and OpenAI collaboration, even acquisition. But Windsurf launches its own models for software engineering while OpenAI launched Codex.
And on a similar note, Google launches something called AlphaEvolve, which is an evolving agent for various different algorithms.
And Copilot can be awakened now. Just say, hey, Copilot.
We'll also dive into how AI can be used for risk management.
And my daughter will love this. New studies prove through a meta analysis that ChatGPT can indeed help in learning moderately. I lose my argument in front of her. We'll talk this and more. Stay tuned after a brief introduction. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jaime Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So again, welcome. Good morning. Good to see you again, Shadab.
Jamie, good to see you back from vacation.
Yeah, that seemed like it was a long time ago already. I'd already got my sights on my next one, but well, we'll get into those travels, I guess, next in the next couple of weeks. But starting things off today, again, let's go with the quote of the week. This one comes from IBM CEO Arvind Krishna, and they just had their Think Week or Think event, which is their quote unquote company event. It seems like all the companies are actually doing that. Their main theme was how IBM can help accelerate enterprises in this Gen AI revolution. So Arvind had a pretty bold quote. In my opinion, this has been something that's been out and about, being spoken by other CEOs, other prominent folks. But word for word, here's his quote: "The era of AI experimentation is over. Today's competitive advantage comes from purpose-built AI integration that drives measurable business outcomes." Emphasizing, the key points on this is that it's the end of the quote unquote experimentation phase. Companies have been kicking the tires with this, granted some more than others over the last 2-3 years. I mean, I remember back when I was at a session in Redmond working with one of our large customers. This was back before the ChatGPT app was released. So, I go back to, yes, people have been working with this technology, or at least AI, Gen AI tech, for a number of years. But, we certainly have the viewpoint where we work with a lot of customers that have been doing this. So we see it firsthand, at least from an enterprise space, that there's been experimentation going on. But they're at a point now, or precipice, where business are now expected to leverage AI in practical and impactful ways. We see this where it's not just proof of concepts anymore, but companies are thinking about how it should be used. And that's really the key part of Arvind's quote. It's that experimentation is actually over. As I think back to purpose-built business solutions, and I say it based upon the work that I know I'm involved in, I'm sure you as well, Shadab, is that these are tailored solutions now. These are solutions that align with some use case, some business. It's not just, quote unquote, some IT person, let me go try out, what Gen AI is all about. It's about aligning it with a use case. So it's got to meet the needs of the business. So it's about moving beyond these generic based AI tools and the things that they're doing, but using it to address specific challenges, specific opportunities. And we certainly have talked about some of those examples or use cases, if you will, over the last, couple of months. I think a key thing too that, Arvind points out is that the the outcome of these things or the use of them should be measurable. So, it's not just about, all right, let me take the latest and greatest models and see what they do, but does it enhance productivity? Does it drive revenue? Does it improve market share? These are not things that are rocket science. These are things that every business, every company that has to, answer to shareholders or, internal boards or whatever it may be, what's the outcome? Like, it doesn't make sense to do something from a business standpoint if there's no ROI against it. And the only way you're actually going to know if you've got some return is that if you're actually measuring these things. And again, whatever your measurement is, it's about, is it producing something that's beneficial? And the other thing too is it's about strategic use. And again, I go back to the quote that Arvin had. It's about measuring those things that we just talked about. But is it something that's going to innovate your company? Is this going to be something that drives productivity, which ultimately comes back to a competitive advantage? Are you using AI in the enterprise that is going to either innovate or reduce the cost for doing business? And that's again really what Arvin was kind of mentioning, and sort of their key points, to be honest with you, of their Think event last week. So I'd be curious, Shadab, I don't know, from the companies that you've seen and dealt with, are they thinking along these lines now and moving away from just, proof of concepts into really trying to drive business value out of the use of these tools?
That is true. I think, Jamie, you and I are very fortunate that we work with actually customers on the front lines actually, and we have a pretty good view into what customers are doing and how they're trying the AI, and what is really yielding the results. I remember a famous quote, "Death by 1,000 POCs." I think that's happened a lot with the customers just trying the different AI POCs. And what I found is that, Jimmy, unfortunately, even though AI may be blamed that, oh, this POC failed, actually, you know what? It was probably a person who failed in executing those, right? It was probably some decision, a wrong decision was made in terms of the design or AI models and things like that. My view is that AI is so versatile. There are many, I would say, much less cases of where AI inherently fail because of its lack of competence, right? It's usually, I think, there is a design problem, there is a model picking problem, there is a approach problem, or just simply a wrong metrics problem. So I feel this, that I think that part is what the enterprises have been suffering. But I totally agree that now that it is an era of scaling, and that's what Microsoft Satya Nadella actually said for 2024, in fact, that the era of experimentation is over. This is an era of year of AI scaling. And I see that, I see that a lot of use cases are actually scaling and giving results, and applications are actually going out in the public, and they are put that into the consumer facing applications, which means that this is clearly it's not about experimentation, it's about scaling now, and putting it to the front game.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. One last thing, the quote that we just went through from Arvin was, as I mentioned, part of their Think event. There are a couple of main themes that came out of that, at least what IBM is touting, hybrid capabilities, being able to take new technologies, blend it with old, enabling, businesses to build AI-based systems, agents using their own data. So it was definitely about how do you leverage, all of the time, money, and spent on the things that, organizations have done over the last, 20, 30 years, and use that data to build pieces, which again drives ROI and integration. One of the things that IBM actually touted through this Think event is, the return based upon automating tools within this hybrid cloud environment. They had a number of 176% ROI over a 3-year based study. So again, just going back to the the key quote that we mentioned from Arvin, it's all about what IBM is pushing, which is this: leverage the things that you already have, let that drive innovation, leverage the things that you already have, let that drive innovation, 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 let that drive in let that drive, an ROI. They did release some new things through Watson X. Again, that's their AI-based platform, more accuracy in terms of the latest Watson X data to drive a 40% accurate or more accurate AI-based agent looking at unstructured data. They also introduced Linux 1, which is IBM's Linux platform, and they're using this, or at least positioning it as a platform for AI inferencing. So being able to run 450 billion operations in a day, all around, all while also enhancing security and performance from that platform. So those are sort of the key highlights of Think. So I know there's a lot of other stuff going on in the news other than just the IBM. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I was talking actually to my daughter, and she actually told me about this, Jamie. Of course, my daughter is Gen Z, and most of the time she spends, even though she physically lives in the house, but she spends most of the time on the TikTok and the other social media. So I was talking with her about and about the AI and things like that. I told her about Duolingo's, AI first memo. In fact, we talked about that a couple of episodes back, and she told me that there is actually a backlash going on the TikTok for the against the Duolingo, because of their memo when it came out, and they started talking about that, how they're going to take AI first approach, where they will actually first evaluate whether a person should be hired for a position or not, only after exhausting all the automation possibilities using AI, things like that, right? So it's a trend that we saw. But then what happened is that people started talking, okay, you choose AI over people. Okay, I'm going to disconnect from Duolingo. I'm going to delete the app and things like that. And it became significant. Actually, a lot of comments came, a lot of people stopped using it. And it was significant enough that my daughter told me that, they had to actually take the Duolingo account private. They had to delete some of the videos, things like that. It became a significant backlash. And then, it even became the news item, actually. So what is happening is, Jamie, that, and this is something that I do believe, and I've been talking about, that ultimately it's down to people whether they adopt something or not. And companies, need to be very careful how they position themselves politically. We have seen that in the case of Tesla. They have also to be very clear not to piss off people, to be honest, right? Because ultimately it's the people who are also getting impacted, and people sympathize with people. People, have a solidarity with other people. So there has been a backlash about, okay, you are taking, AI is taking a job, and we are going to resist, and a lot of people stop using these products. Ultimately, these companies cannot sell to agents and AI, they have to sell to people. So that's what happened about Duolingo. Similarly, something we also saw from this company Klarna, right? We have talked about this also in the past, where this company has been playing. They famously said that they want to be the most famous guinea pig for OpenAI. That they want to try everything. They have done some bold things, and of course, a lot of that is optic, but doesn't always result. So, for example, they are actually now talking about that. Um, Basically, we will invest in the quality of the human support, because they famously said that they are basically, the AI agents are doing the work of 700 people in the customer service. But they are now saying that they will actually bring the human touch back, because what they also feel is that the while the cost unfortunately seems to have been a predominant evaluation factor when organizing this, what you end up having is lower quality. And also, of course, the emotional quotient and things like that. People ultimately still prefer to talk with people, and that's why they're bringing the people back. So, a bit of the other side of the AI story. While AI is great, I don't blame AI as a technology. I think it's really about how people position it, and the greed that generally overtake, and then people start showing it. Okay, cut the cost, fire the people.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
I see this as like this pendulum that's swinging back and forth. Like you're going to get companies that put out some pretty bold statements, but then it's the backlash from quote unquote the public on how that's perceived. And then companies are going to pull that. Sorry about that. They're going to pull back those statements, and then it's going to end up somewhere in the middle. It's about perception. It's also about how companies are are perceived really by the public. And if there is too much of that backlash, then they're not going to use that product. And you know, go see the quote that we were just talked about before. It's about return. It's about the outcomes. And if you don't get that messaging just right on what you're doing or what you're building or how AI is being infused into your tools, then you might see outcomes that were unexpected. And I think these are you know two good examples.
True. And bad news travel faster.
Yeah.
One of the thing is that, and let's say, imagine a person who's impacted by the job cuts, right, because of AI, or have been, like struggling with learning with AI, but has been forced to learn it. They might still do it just to keep the job and paycheck coming. But the reality is that they're not going to actually fully adopt it, right? It's not like a, fully heartfelt adoption. So companies need to be very, very careful. This is where companies generally lose out the battle. Great strategies and poorly executed, and I see that all over the places.
Yep. So in other news, the United States and also the UAE have made some announcements this past week, and it's really around. I'm going to call it an AI agreement. There are definitely other things that were announced as well, but let's focus on the AI side. So this agreement is set out to deepen the partnership between these two entities, that being the U.S. and the UAE, around artificial intelligence. Really, it's about establishing a framework for that collaboration. And there's two major focuses: one, to accelerate AI development, and then it's also about integrating across different various sectors. Obviously, energy, oil are one of those, as well as then major industries in terms of like travel. So there's a couple of core important parts of this agreement. One is to build a new AI campus, which would be aimed at fostering that innovation development in AI technologies. That this campus will actually serve as a hub for this research, development, training of AI. Obviously, focused on these cutting edge solutions that zero in on technology. Part of this, the way I read it, is to bring the technology, bring the thought leadership to the population of the UAE. This way, their individuals can get behind and focus on ways that they could, number one, create, develop, and use AI-based tools. There's another super important part of this agreement, and that's about bringing the actual technology, the hardware in. And it's about purchasing. Obviously, we look at, how do we advance the US focus on at least keeping the focus on building the latest and greatest technology, specifically talking about the chips that run all of this AI based powered tooling. So the UAE has focused on expanding the chips that are brought in to build, these campuses, build the data centers. So 500,000 NVIDIA chips annually at the minimum. Obviously, NVIDIA chips, whether it's NVIDIA or somebody else, but again, this is focused on promoting US based companies. The chips are crucial for obviously powering the AI needs, whether it's the applications, the computational requirements for training models, so on and so forth. So that's a super important part of this. There's also investment dollars, goes without saying. Like I said, there was a much broader set of quote unquote agreements between the two, governmental agencies, but it's all about the investment that's coming in. I know the overall investment was like measured, 1.4 trillion, but for the AI specifically, it's 200 billion. I love how we just throw around billions like they're just dollars, but 200 billion for this partnership to build the campus, to build various different components that are needed for this AI acceleration. So that's infrastructure, it's the research initiatives, obviously technology to support the growth within the UAE. So anyway, I look at that as, that's a great step for advancing, just AI in general, but then putting the capability of our US based companies to evolve that. Obviously, there's other chips out there from some other organizations, companies outside of the US. It's about, in my opinion, staying ahead of those companies while at the same time driving new innovation for what NVIDIA can create and deliver.
Yeah, I think OpenAI is looking to do something like international Stargate project. I believe they will be probably part of this partnership as well. They've been working already closely with those governments also internationally. Okay, talking about the OpenAI, I think this new model GPT 4.1 is now actually available in the Chat GPT. And basically it was actually launched as an API, but now it is also available in the Chat GPT. So you go to the Chat GPT and you can find that among the other models category, you go there and how it's demonstrated here on the slide, you can find that model and you can see what it says: GPT 4.1, great for coding and instruction. Now, this model is definitely pretty good. It has a expanded context window. Remember, 1 million token context window, so it definitely helps. It is also, for example, it has better, I would say, latency, particularly in the mini part, etc. And then it also is cheaper in general. Particularly when I'm looking at the API, I know that this is not about the cost in the Chat GPT, which is part of generally a monthly subscription. But in the API world, GPT 4.1 roughly about 25% cheaper than the GPT 4.0. GPT-4 is still a great versatile model, but GPT 4.1 is doing better, particularly in the coding and the instruction following.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I was gonna let me jump in on that because
yeah,
and maybe you're gonna get to this, but to me, it's a level of frustration. We're both paid users of GPT plus accounts, and there's so many different models, and which one do you pick? And what I've seen personally, as well as then what I've read on the various different forums, is which model is the flagship model? Is it 4.1? Is it 4.0? And to me, it's very evident based upon where 4.1 is being shown, or where do you go to pick up 4.1? It's not, number one, the default. Number two, it's buried within these more models. So that tends to let me believe that 4.1 is not the flagship model. I'd love to get your perspective on this one
yeah,
as well, Shadab. But in the things again that I've read and tested out personally, and you even just covered it, 4.1 is really good at certain things, instruction following, some aspects of coding, but it's not it. And again, Jamie's personal view, it's not the de facto model that you should be using inside of GPT or Chat GPT. The reason, again, is the 4.1 model is not natively multimodal, and hopefully people understand that. Like when you look at video ingestion or voice sorry you um, yeah, voice ingestion or sound or being able to create things, that's not natively inherent within the 4.1. It uses adjunct pieces, but the 4.0 model actually has those built from the ground up, basically. So, is 4.1, what is it? To me, it's the next iteration of the GPT 4.0 model. It's not 4.0. So, and hopefully that makes sense. But it my word of caution would be, don't use it as de facto. Everything that you want to do out of ChatGPT should be the GPT 4.1 model. No, use it where it's shines, which is around that instruction following coding, but not for every task that you want to do. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think well said, Jamie, because I'm also observing the same thing that GPT 4.1 and many of my customers actually pivoted to start using GPT 4.1 mini, for example, because their use cases were agnostic in the way that, they were simply doing some RAG based chatbots, even though it was public facing, but they were able to quickly move to GPT 4.1 mini because it was fast enough and it does the job pretty well. And it's pretty good in instruction following and things like that. Not because of the context window. I feel the context window is a bit overrated. It's not always useful. Um, but yes, I mean, I think and this is where I said in the beginning that I was a bit surprised, and the reason being because when the Chat GPT 4.1 API was launched, what OpenAI had said, what you can find here on the screen, they said that the GPT 4.1 will only be available via the API. In ChatGPT, many of the improvements in the instruction following, coding, and intelligence have been gradually incorporated into the latest version of GPT 4.0, and we will continue to incorporate more with future releases. So, this is from OpenAI website. When they launched the GPT 4.1 API, I was not expecting GPT 4.1 in the Chat GPT. So now, I don't know what happened, but here is my opinion about that. I think this is as OpenAI is increasingly trying to get into this coding and programming space where Anthropic has taken a major lead. They are actually trying to bring the GPT 4.1 back into it, and they're probably trying to experiment and see how people are going to use it to capture some of the usage trends within the Chat GPT, to see if they are finding a better performance, they're finding a better adoption on the coding, right? I think they're trying to put that in front of the Anthropic Claude Sonnet 3.7, and that is why I believe that they have incorporated that. There was Otherwise, I don't see any reason for them to go back on their words and then include that, because they say that a lot of features were already included. But ChatGPT 4.0 perceptionally was not considered as good for the coding as the 3.7 sonnet was. So I think that's one of the reasons, and you can see that, right? And you can see here, one of the thing is that this was actually the original, the API comparison. Chat GPT 4.1, Chat GPT 4.0, both are pretty much equal, neck and neck on the latency. And then, however, in the intelligence part, GPT 4.1 is slightly better. But then when it comes to the mini is way too better, actually, when it comes to the intelligence, and just a little bit more slower than the GPT-4o mini. So mini was actually a step up on the GPT-4o mini a lot. And that's why the GPT 4.1 mini, I have also seen, is becoming quite popular. And that's what you will see. And you can see here also in the instructions following as well. This is all internal OpenAI instruction following eval that they had launched. And you can see GPT 4.1 is about 49%. GPT 4.0 is much lesser, 29%. And GPT 4.1 is actually lesser than the reasoning model. But then if you see the GPT 4.1 mini, is also 45%, which is way too higher than the GPT-4o mini, which was just about 27%. And here is another, this is for a software engineering, right? So the SWE bench verified accuracy, here again, you can see 4.1 is way better at 55%, even higher than the O3 mini, for this particular eval, software engineering related. And you can see again, GPT-4o mini was way less, 9% only. GPT 4.1 mini is 24%. So 4.1 is really good at coding, programming, software engineering, and I think this is why they're bringing it back in the front in ChatGPT as well, because they want people to start using this and compare that against the Cloud 3.7 Sonnet.
Yeah, so it just validates and verifies the things that we were saying based upon looking at these charts. It's the 4.1 if you're doing something, and you don't want to use the pure reasoning models, then this is this is a really good way of actually doing it. And actually, as you just mentioned, it actually beats out some of the O3 mini. What's curious is no correlate or no correlation here, or no example comparison to the O4 Mini High, which is what I use a lot if I'm not using a Claude model or the Gemini 2.5 Pro, which would be interesting in and of itself. Obviously, this is all OpenAI comparisons.
Yep.
All right. So that's cool. Like I said, I do have it in my ChatGPT now, and I have used it a little bit just to do some comparisons. So we'll see how what transpires. And I think everybody's all waiting for GPT-5.
And that's true. Um, let's see when that comes out. Hopefully late summer.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where we'll see where it ends up for sure in terms of timing. Um, so let's jump to a slightly different topic here. I know that we've talked sometimes about obviously around enterprises using Gen AI and the benefits and tying it back to what we just talked about as it related to the quote from IBM. It's all about driving outcomes. Well, one of the other things that we think about for AI use is how can it drive outcomes for society? And I kind of lump this into AI for good. Like, how are we using this to help drive like new new discoveries in health, or how can we use AI to help discover maybe new ways of creating or storing energy? Obviously, energy is a big part of our discussions overall as a society, and that drives a lot of things. But it's all about AI for good. So Meta actually has a team called FAIR, which stands for Fundamental AI Research. And what they announced were some groundbreaking um, research in molecular property prediction, neuroscience, as well as language processing. So, overall, as I mentioned before, FAIR has this commitment for advancing machine intelligence. So, what they put out again were these three things. So, the first one is the advancement in quantum chemistry and using AI. So, they actually introduced two different things. One is what they call OMOL 25, which is a data set which provides massive and diverse data sets for high accuracy quantum chemistry calculations. And that can enable breakthroughs in things like healthcare. It can enable breakthroughs in things like, as I mentioned, energy storage, various different technologies. So, very important for these research projects to be able to have data sets that do model the various different ways that that properties, atoms need to actually follow, or at least these molecules. Speaking of atoms, they actually released something called the UMA model. So it actually is a model that standardizes, or at least looks to create standards around modeling atomic interactions. So this will improve predictions and the understanding of molecular behavior, which could be used to then drive various different innovations in science that can use those atomic interactions. And again, this could be I just think about the applications where this could be applied if we're able to use AI in a much grander scale, as well as being able to use AI that can help in understanding the physical properties and the physical elements of our world, which again are atomic interactions. That's at the core of what we are personally. We're made up of atoms and molecules. So again, it's a new set of things that will help scientists be able to understand the way that atoms actually work together. The other thing that they put out is generative modeling. So this is a way or a scalable method of actually for training generative models without data. So it's using something called reward-driven objectives. This could certainly revolutionize the way that generative models are, not only quote unquote trained, but developed and applied. This to me is like going to be a really bad analogy, but if this adjoint sampling could actually build models without data. It's almost like, how can I wash clothes without using water, right? That's it gets down to that level of simplicity if you think about it that way. But this goes back to a problem that we have now is, the models that we have today, these foundational models, they're trained on a lot of data. Where's the next set of data coming from, right? Yes, you could use models to generate data, and that's being done today, but you're still using the same base of knowledge. Well, this joint sampling is a way to, get to that next level of models without having to rely on data in and of itself. Again, this is one of the reasons why the joint sampling is of importance. There was also some announcements around neuroscience and language processing. This was actually done in conjunction with um, an educational partner, but this is looking at how language represents, or at least the language and where that aligns with our brain. This actually parallels some of the behaviors of these large language models. So the intent here is, if we can understand the human cognition and the way that our brain deals with language, we could use that to interpret what the LLMs are doing. And the implications of this are obviously focused, at least in my opinion, around security. And this goes to the super alignment of models, because if we don't know the way that models think, then we can't control them. And if we're dealing with security, we need to understand, how these models think and potentially will behave. So again, applying a language study to the understanding of the models is super important, especially as we go through, alignment with models and quelling what I would call fears. Some obviously based in reality or truth, but quelling those fears around use of these models themselves. So overall, Meta is really pushing the boundaries of AI, quantum chemistry, generative modeling, neuroscience, and it's all about, trying to drive progress and innovation, across not just a industry but many different industries or domains altogether. So I love this because it's not just, hey, what's the next model, or when's GPT-5 coming out. It's really about how we're driving use for, us as a human population.
I agree totally. I mean, it's like fundamental. I think the AI has is not just about the giblification of image. This is a great example of how the fundamental sciences are being changed. The new drugs will be discovered. The new, kind of batteries will be made, and it's just amazing. Like, the acceleration of the scientific progress is just unbelievable through this. Such a versatile use of AI across the board. Okay, in another news, Jamie, that this is a bit funny actually. Anthropic's lawyer. So, Anthropic lawyer was actually in the court, and they are fighting against a copyright violation use lawsuit from Universal Music Group, and they were basically defending themselves against that. No, our models have not used. Uh, that, like, against the copyright violation from the Universal Music Group and things like that. Funnily enough, the lawyer actually cited some cases which turned out to be the hallucination from the Claude model. So it's just unbelievable, right? A company is trying to defend, and then they get another embarrassment that, in the code, their own AI chatbot was found to be hallucinating. And the lawyer actually, they just simply accepted that, and they didn't even challenge it. It's just unbelievable, right? I mean, the lawyers are constantly in the news, and this is also one of the industry which is under major threat from the AI, because they are not, like, they're using AI in a lot of these cases. They're not, however, verifying. I mean, it worries, right, when people try to use thing. Of course, you can't blame just the AI. It is also the human part to be blamed, because human, in the loop is an important model. So, funnily enough, this happened, and then Anthropic submitted that, okay, it was an erroneous citation and things like that. So, we'll see how that impacts the case. Probably not, or maybe it will. We'll see about that, but certainly some perceptions will be changed.
Yeah, and like you said, it's about perceptions. I know some of the saw some of the the notes slash, posts that Anthropic made, they did say there were inconsistencies within the model that actually created hallucination. So it wasn't like the lawyer, quote unquote, did something wrong. It was that the model actually created something and made it up. But again, it goes back to just checking and citing sources. But anyway, different topic. We kind of just, we mentioned a little bit before about the ability for these models to code when we were chatting or talking about ChatGPT and 4.1. Well, in the open AI world, we talked about, at least I think it was last episode, that they were, in talks to buy Windsurf, and that has certainly progressed. What I'm about to talk about is Windsurf is not just sitting and waiting patiently for OpenAI. They've got a great product as compared to some of the IDEs that are out there today for developing and building applications using, quote unquote, AI-based agents to help with coding. There's an issue, however, with the models that are out there today. They're not software engineering models. They're models that can do a bunch of different things. They can do code generation. They can do, write an email, right? And anything in between, but they're not focused on doing software engineering. And software engineering is more than just doing code. It's about understanding, the design, the architecture, how, one step will lead into the next. It's also about how that will play out as it relates to doing like unit testing and taking into not only just the code into account, but all these other things. So, what you're seeing here on the screen is ultimately what I was getting at. So Windsurf, with all of those challenges that I just mentioned around like today's models, and yes, don't get me wrong, O3 is definitely better. Any of these reasoning models are going to be better than just a plain old code. At least the forefront models like O3 or Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude, Anthropic Claude, Sonnet 3.7. Those are great models for coding, and they're used to create more of these agent-based models, or agent-based, at least as it relates to the different tools, whether it's Windsurf or Cursor or Visual Studio Code. You see all those different vendors actually creating tools that use the agents. But what Windsurf has come out and said was, yeah, those are good, but we need something different. And that different is going to be a model that isn't just focused on code. It's all those things I just mentioned. It needs to take a software engineering viewpoint on developing your application, where it takes all those into account at once. So that's why they've come up with their own models. Quite, I'll call this maybe cute. They're naming it SWE-1. And the SWE comes from software engineering, the S, the W, the E. And again, there are actually benchmarks on SWE, and this is part of the reason why I think they picked that. But it's a family of models, and it's optimized for that entire software engineering process. Like I said, it's not just about the code. So there's 3 different models that they introduced. Their top tier is called SWE-1. This is the one that's got the most baked in reasoning. It's as I said, they're most capable of these models. This is only available to the paid users, by the way. Then you have the SWE Lite, which is a smaller. It's certainly a better quality model, and it's free for all users. And then you have the SWE Mini, which is the quote unquote fast. It's their fastest model. It's best for like these passive experiences when you're working inside of Windsurf. And again, that's free to all users. The ultimate goal, and if you read Windsurf's article, and we'll have it in the show notes, but they clearly state their goal is to accelerate software development by 99%. And notice how I said software development, not coding. It's about that whole whole process that is needs to be evolved, or targeted to be evolved by Windsurf. And again, the models are their viewpoint, or at least these new models by them are their viewpoint on how to get that, because they feel that the current coding models, all the ones I just talked about, they've reached the plateau and they don't cover the full spectrum of software engineering and the process that's associated with it. You know, as I said before, when we do these intros, Shadab and I have been around a very long time, around IT. Between the two of us, we probably have over 60 years worth of experience. And, part of that is how we look at, systems that need to be built. It's not just about the code. And I look at things, take into account, what are the requirements? What's the implication of building this? What's the architecture you need to look at? So what Windsurf is touting that these new series of models do is just that. So it takes like the experience of someone who's looked at building applications, taking the software engineering approach and applying it to these models. So what they've obviously, on any time that a company releases models, they obviously do a whole bunch of evaluation. You could read this when you look at the link from the show notes. But what they do put out there is that these SWE models perform very close, and in some cases outperform some of the aspects of these models that are out there today. So it's doing a similar job to the frontier models, but then also allowing it to do what they call these experiments. So the experimentation for creating that full spectrum of applications, and they've used user acceptance and having feedback from developers, people that are using these tools, come back with a very positive outcome for their development aspect. The other thing that's super critical, obviously, again, if you've used any of these latest quote unquote vibe coding tools, if you haven't, go see our episode with Dan Giannone, where we spent a whole episode just on vibe coding. But at least within Windsurf, this is brought into their system. So it's got an agent mode, and it understands that and how to use these SWE-1 models within the system itself. So again, point here is we're seeing this evolution or evolvement of models that are specifically designed for software engineering. Windsurf has built their own because they didn't see capable, or at least what they deem as more capable from their models. What I find interesting is where this will go in the next several months, 6 months, a year, because as we previously announced, OpenAI has a bid out there, and I think it's been approved to buy Windsurf, and I think that was like a $3 billion valuation. So will these SW1 models exist? Will they evolve? Will they be part of the next generation of reasoning models? Your guess is as good as mine. But I would assume that if OpenAI is buying Windsurf, they probably knew about these models before us, and they probably are already thinking about how this will get integrated into their flagship set of reasoning models. Anyway,
It's all funny how these games play out, actually. So,
yeah,
like, this whole announcement was actually pretty close to the announcement from OpenAI about the Codex as well. And OpenAI has launched Codex. So, remember, the next week is Microsoft Build, and also we have uh, Google's own event as well, right? I think it's isn't it IO? I think their developer community. And sometimes OpenAI just seems to have a hunch of, okay, when to release, so that they can preempt some of the other announcements. I'm not sure what is coming out next week, but maybe some of these announcements were done in advance of those other expected announcements. Who knows?
yep.
And yeah, I mean, I think with Windsurf, people are already scratching their hands about that, how OpenAI is going to use this, what will happen to Windsurf, what will happen to the other models. A lot of questions are still open, so we will see how that goes. Okay, let's talk about. We did talk about the Google a little bit, and Google actually came out with another announcements about AlphaEvolve. Um, AlphaEvolve is basically a new agent. It's a Gemini powered coding agent for designing advanced algorithm. And this agent is basically designed to evolve algorithms for both mathematical and practical applications in computing by combining the large language models and the automated evals. So, the way it goes is that, as it is shown here on the screen, you basically have you create there is a prompt part to it, something that basically is going to sample the prompt and I would say, like, let's say, manufacture the prompt, etc. Then there is a bunch of LLMs. It could be Gemini Pro or Gemini Flash and things like that. It will basically use the appropriate model for whichever purpose it is. Then there are automatic evals. They will verify the accuracy and the efficiency of the algorithm, and it will continue to essentially evolve, right? So it can work on its own to evolve those algorithm. The way that works is essentially they have already used it. So they talk about that how it has enhanced the efficiency of Google's own data centers and the chip design and AI training process, because this is an algorithm. So remember, this agent is not just about the coding, right? This is about algorithm. That's where it actually excels at enhancing. It has designed faster matrix multiplication algorithm and found new solutions to open mathematical problems, right? So it's all about in that domain. That's where it actually specializes. This is not using it for just computer programming. It does use the computer programming as well. Of course, it can create it, but it's primarily targeted around the algorithm. um, it has a pretty general nature. It can be actually applied to various domains like material science and drug discovery and sustainability and all those kind of domains. Wherever, like, there is an intense algorithm that goes in to actually find the new patterns, discover new drugs or materials and things like that. It actually, for example, it can also even help in the hardware design. It basically proposed a new Verilog rewrite for a key arithmetic circuit, which was integrated into an upcoming tensor processing unit, which is also manufactured by Google, by the way, right? So this is where the Alpha Evolve is suited for. Google, this comes from Google DeepMind Research, and they are planning an early access program. So it's not like openly available for everybody. They are soliciting the interest from anybody who's interested in using it, particularly academic user, or just exploring the broader availability. So it will be out there for people to express their interest and perhaps get the access to it and try it out in different settings.
Yeah, I think back to what I was just mentioning about Meta Fair. Um, this aligns with that. It's about how are these organizations actually using the models to drive, you know, scientific research, or driving new things that either humans themselves, number one, can't come up with or wouldn't come up with, or more likely it would be a really long time because there's just so much data to look at and or to things to theorize across that information. So, I love it that and again, I'm going to classify this in the AI for good, whether it's Google, whether it's Meta, whether it's Microsoft. We even mentioned some things a couple episodes ago around like Project Aurora, which is using AI for weather prediction and modeling. So this falls into that same line. It's how can Alpha evolve, change and build new things, which obviously it is, as the couple of examples that already cited through. So let's get into another topic. You kind of briefly just mentioned it, Codex. Let me tell you what this is. This is OpenAI. They released a research preview dubbed Codex. What is interesting is that Codex is at least the underlying model for Codex has been around. It's called Codex-1. It's the underlying model, which is built from O3 for software engineering tasks. If I had to put this in like layman's terms, when you look through what Codex-1 is, it's a AI-based agent that's running in the cloud, specifically within OpenAI's world. But it's an agent where there's no IDE around it. You got to like send your quote unquote task. And, again, this is around coding. So you would specify, hey, I've got this code. It's really, really complex. I'm having problems with X. Here you go, OpenAI / quote unquote Codex-1, figure out what's wrong, right? And it goes through and it does a diff. I don't want to go too deep into it, but it'll come and look at your code and give you your differential, and then you have to apply that diff into your existing code. It's all sort of like command line interface that's been around. So what OpenAI is releasing is this quote unquote tool called Codex. I wish they would have called it something else, because it's like, are you talking about Codex, the UI, or you're talking about Codex, the model? Again, Codex, the model, is Codex-1, as I said, which is a derivative of O3. So what Codex is it's this agent for doing software engineering that can handle these different tasks, because again, agents have reasoners. Reasoners then have orchestration steps inside of them. They have things called planners. So this Codex-1 agent can figure out all the different tasks based upon the planner. It runs them in parallel. Everything from like, writing new code, fixing bugs, and, aligning to the things that need to be done. Kind of go back to what was mentioned before with Windsurf and the SWE models. Same kind of concept, but now we're talking inside of OpenAI, which is part of the reason why I said it's going to be interesting to see what Windsurf does, or what OpenAI does with Windsurf. Anyway, back to Codex. So this is now a user interface, and the user interface, where do you think that's going to be? Well, it's inside of, I'm going to call it the ChatGPT interface, and that's really where it is. So today, not everybody has the ability to actually see this. So right now, it's only in ChatGPT Pro. It also is available to GPT Enterprise users. But what you're going to see is new functionality that says code or ask. Ask is basically don't execute the stuff, but just analyze, and then give me back what you think. Code is, hey, here's my quote unquote hairy, most complex set of code. Here I'm going to prompt you, and then boom, let the Codex model, quote unquote Codex-1, do its thing, and then it brings back the differential file for what you need to work. So again, I go back to, if you've used any of these vibe coding tools, like whether it's Windsurf or Cursor, and to even the newest extent of Visual Studio Code, when you put those things into agent mode, it goes off and analyzes all those things and changes your code automatically. What Codex is basically doing is, the way I see it, is it's a moment in time in what you would have been doing within that IDE, where the other IDEs like Windsurf, it's taking a piece of code and telling you what you should do against it. So to me, this is, again, my personal belief. It's interesting. Certainly, if you've got one piece of code and you want an agent to analyze, prepare, and then change, certainly really good. But to me, this is somewhat lost in the grander scheme of things. When you're actually working on an application, it's not just one piece at a time. You need to constantly evolve and look at all different parts of your code. So while I understand what Codex is all for and about, to me, it's a part of a puzzle and not the entire solved puzzle in and of itself. So to me, I see this as a part in the grander scheme of things that I believe OpenAI is building or wants to build. with Windsurf, and whether or not they use SWE or these codex models, or how are they going to evolve over time. Maybe, and again, crystal ball, I'm just going to throw a prediction out there. Maybe ChatGPT then morphs into a functionality that's got Windsurf on it. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm seeing with Codex. But again, I go back to what is Codex today. It's within ChatGPT. It'll be a sidebar, and users can switch on to this coding capability, which will then be using quote unquote Codex inside of ChatGPT, and underlying that is the Codex One model. So as I kind of already alluded to, this is only for ChatGPT Pro and enterprise team users. This will be coming to Plus users soon. Does soon mean the next week? Don't know, but OpenAI has been pretty good at rolling things out within a month or so. So that's where things are. They do obviously have future plans, other than rolling out to different paid users. They didn't make any mention, by the way, of this becoming available to the free users, but they do have future plans, making it more interactive, being able to have flexibility in the agent workflows, deeper integration with existing tools, hint, hint, Windsurf, as well as being able to make these things asynchronous inside of the collaboration and working with these agent-based coding tools.
Great. I will be actually looking forward to use it. In the other news from OpenAI, another thing that they just launched was another connector, set of connectors actually for the deep research agent. Now, deep research has become quite popular actually. So, this is no surprise. They're adding more and more. But when you do the deep research, when you use a deep research agent, you don't want to just rely on the web sources. You want to actually consume on and build upon the information that you have available in house. In fact, that's where most of the monetization comes from. So you want to use the information that you have in your systems, in the SharePoint, in the GitHub code base, right? And it could be in any storage format as well. So they continue to add actually more, and as you can see here, they've actually now added the SharePoint, they have added Dropbox, they had already added GitHub a week ago, and web search is anyway available and included in the deep research anyway. So interesting to see this integration. I think they will continue to add probably Slack. They will probably add databases and things like that. That's where I think that but deep research is indeed becoming quite popular.
The very powerful for sure. It's about grounding what deep research is going to be looking at. The web, obviously, you want to pick up latest information. Use of SharePoint that then lends itself to, at least automatically in my head, corporate data, right?
Right.
If you're going to GitHub and you've got private repositories, that's corporate or slash important information. I think what's important to this is how is that data protected? Um, you know, I, whether or not this gets released out to the free version of deep research, or even within the ChatGPT Plus accounts, that data is potentially not yours, meaning that OpenAI has access to that. If you're on the Pro or Enterprise, there are data protection, security things that are included that are different than those other versions of ChatGPT. So the only word of caution that I would say for people that might be using this, especially on the ChatGPT Plus, is just kind of consider what you're sending in from like SharePoint as an example, because you could be sending some of your data to get trained by OpenAI.
True. I think that's why it is right now available in Plus, Pro, and Team, and it's in beta right now. So, people have to still be careful using it. But I believe that in terms of they do have several like security and encryption and things like that in place as well. So compared to 2 years ago when those controls were not in place, I think they have made tremendous progress on that line. um, but again, I think a lot of enterprises still do not trust, and they continue to block plus users, etc. They want their employees to actually use the enterprise approved tools. It could be Copilot, it could be things like that. Even, and Copilot also has a deep research actually agent as well. So this remains a sticky point. Companies still are battling, honestly. In terms of, but I think the Chat at GPT enterprise subscription is continuing to grow, and it is getting more and more adopted. Jimmy.
Yeah, exactly. And my point, I'm actually jumped into my ChatGPT Plus account. There's data controls. Just make sure you're understanding um, what you're sending and what you're using inside of a tool like ChatGPT. You do have the ability to control
Yeah.
what is being used or not used. Anyway, that's I'll get off soapbox on that one. So on one last piece of news here today, and this one's more of a maybe I'll call it a lighthearted one, is that Microsoft announced Hey Copilot. So what this is the ability to wake up a Windows 11 based PC by saying Hey Copilot. So this will actually invoke the Copilot using the Hey Copilot term. So this is a hands-free feature which allows users to start communications with Copilot's voice or Copilot voice integration inside of their PC. Uh, the key thing is that this is not enabled by default. So if you do want to use it, you have to activate it within the Copilot app settings by toggling on listen for Hey Copilot, kind of akin to, and if I say this, my phone might go off, but Hey Siri, and there it goes. My phone just went off, which I knew it would. So this just is a, wake on word detection. It's performed locally. It ensures privacy, things of that nature. So I know that will always come up. As far as how this will be able to be used, obviously your PC needs to be on. So it's not like you could just talk to a PC that is not powered on. It also needs to be unlocked. So if your PC is locked, you're not going to be able to do the Hey Copilot itself. And obviously you're going to need internet connection, because that's the voice Copilot commands need to be connected to the internet. And as of today, it only supports English as a language. So this will be rolling out to Windows Insiders first. But their display language, as I mentioned, needs to be set to English because only English is supported. So again, rolling out as we speak. So look for
Makes
Hey
sense.
Copilot if you got Windows 11.
Yeah, makes sense, Jamie. I think Suleiman has also talked about it. How voice is going to be the most important channel of interaction with AI. Makes sense. It's the most natural interaction, right? This is how humans have always interacted with each other. It's the most comfortable compared to like the videos or typing and things like that, or writing. So yeah, I think this will be pretty handy. Okay, let's talk about, we have been talking about some of the AI use cases, how AI is being used. And this is one of the strength of our channel, that, we focus a lot on the practical use in the corporate and the employment. And, like most of the people are part of the corporate jobs, and it actually benefits them understanding that perspective. So here it is, right here is one of the use case I wanted to actually quickly talk about, which is basically this company, construction company, and it's a public case study available on the Azure side as well. This is an example of how AI can be used to identify risk in complex projects. So Strawberg is a company which is based out of Austria. It has several people, thousands of people under employment, and they are into the construction business. The thing is about the construction business that projects are complex, and the margins are less. there could be tons of things that can go wrong in a construction project. It could be weather, it could be the equipment outage or malfunction, or it could be safety issue which will shut down the work at the site for weeks and days, right? I mean, there's just tons of risk, right? It could be violation, it could be regulation. So there's just tons of risk that a construction company has to deal with. Risk management is an extremely important part. In fact, project management in construction industry is a very, I would say, prized experience. So the companies, of course, want to identify as much as possible the risk and accurately predict them for a specific project, or even decide to pick whether they should take up this project or not based on the amount of risk and their risk appetite. So what they did is they basically got all their data together, put that into Azure using the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, which basically combines a bunch of tools, Synapse and Azure Databricks and other. And then they use Azure OpenAI to actually identify the risk. And with just 3 months of data, just 3 months of data, okay, this is they were able to actually predict the risk with the 80% accuracy. And that was huge for that company, right? For that company, that means that it can translate into saving millions of dollars, okay, by avoiding the risk. So this is actually another great use case. I think it generally doesn't get talked a lot, but I believe that this is a great use case where companies can identify the risk to any project and avoid the risk. Because risk are the biggest risk to any project execution, right? If you can identify that, you can actually mitigate them, right? So that's where the key to success lies. um, Now, let me just finally, let's talk about one more thing, right? In terms of our section of trivia, sometimes we talk about some of the trivia that, based on some of the studies and statistic and things that observation that come to the light. So, a new paper actually was published in Nature, and this is Nature is a very prestigious journal, of course, and this paper, what it does, it basically analyzes the effect of ChatGPT on a student's learning performance, learning perception. Like learning performance is easy to understand, like whether it enhances their learning or not. Learning perception is also about, like, in terms of the ease of use, right, or the ease of instruction following, and using the tools. And then higher order thinking, right, to be able to critically reason and think. Does the chat gpt enhance it? Now, generally perception is that chat gpt makes you dumb because it will do things for you, and then you basically stop thinking. In fact, that's what I argue with my daughter sometimes, that hey, don't overuse it, it will make you dumb.
Yeah.
But this study, what it does is, it basically takes, it's a meta analysis, right? So it's not a new study. What it did, it is basically consolidation of 51 different studies that has happened over the last few years. Many of the studies found that there was a marked improvement in the learning performance, and these related categories. Some studies found that actually no, there was no improvement. In fact, it degraded, right? So there are a bunch of studies on different lines. So what this paper did, it basically they did a meta analysis, put all these studies together, look at the data, and then came up with a overall finding on average what you find. And then what they found was that overall it does improve the learning performance, um, and it has a large positive impact on learning performance actually. And there is a moderately positive impact on enhancing learning perception, like the ease of learning. And then it does foster higher order thinking. So that's the overall finding of this meta analysis that came out was. They and there are tons of statistical terms that you can find. This paper is available on the Nature. You can easily find this by the title, and you can see the different, for the statistical junkies, that you can find all those terms here. But this paper did find, I would say, tries to establish whether there is a correlation between the chat gpt use of chat gpt and the learning or not. Now, on this slide, you can also find that some of the recommendations that they put about, right, based on this finding. And here it is. Number one, appropriate learning scaffolds or educational frameworks should be provided when using ChatGPT to develop a student higher order thinking. Number two, the broad use of ChatGPT at various grade levels and in different types of courses should be encouraged to support diverse learning needs. Um, of course, a lot of people learn differently, right? I mean, it does actually support that. Number three recommendation is ChatGPT should be actively integrated into different learning models to enhance student learning, especially in problem based learning, where a problem is actually given and then you solve that, right? That's a problem based learning. Number four recommendation is continuous use of ChatGPT should be ensured to support student learning with a recommended duration of 4 to 8 weeks for more stable effects. In fact, if you use it for a very, very short term, like just under a week, you don't see any improvement really. So you need to have a little bit of the short term, at least use 4 to 8 weeks to see a more stable and significant effect. And number five is basically ChatGPT should be flexibly integrated into teaching as an intelligent tutor, learning partner, and educational tool. So I would say that this paper, it does try to find some consensus among different studies, etc.
Okay.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
then I think that is all, Jamie, for this week. I think we covered a lot.
yeah, we did. Definitely did. Yeah, I was just had some thoughts on the education side. Certainly agree with all those points. Seeing things myself. Obviously, I've got a son in college and use of these tools. There was and maybe I'll just hold this for maybe another episode. There was another study done recently around the use of um, generative AI in students, but it was more from the standpoint of ethics,
Mm,
and the way that students thought how to use or what they're using Gen AI for. So that what I'm getting at, there's this line between what's what are you getting from a value, and that's what we just went through in terms of what they're able to do. But then there's this line of is the use of AI considered cheating? And then couple that with the way that institutions, all the way down to the professors or teachers, are considering the use of that. So to me, there's two sides of this. One is what is the perceived benefit that people are getting, and to me, it's clear, and we just went through some of that study. But then there's the other side of it, which is all right. The students are using it, but how are they viewing from an ethical standpoint on what they're doing? Then more importantly, what's the other side, like the administration? How are they viewing the things that are actually being done? So maybe that might be for a next episode. We could get into what that paper talked about as far as the use and ethics, because to me we have this sort of like um,
narratives, yeah.
competing notions and the narrative around that. But anyway, but yes, to your point, we covered a lot. And I think if we covered ethics right now, probably spend another half hour, 45 minutes just talking on that alone. But so probably best off for another day, another conversation.
Perfect. Okay, Jamie, have a great day, and bye everyone. Please continue
Yep.
to like promote this, like it, comment it, and we are always open to hear the feedback.
Likewise. Thanks again. See you, Shadab.
Bye, Jimmy. Bye, everyone.